So, tonight I went to go see the re-release of Advent Children, which was really fun. I actually didn't get to see it in the theater when it originally came out, or in any subsequent releases. So, being able to see it on the big screen was pretty cool. So yeah, I had a really good time. Probably the most interesting thing was they did kind of an interview with the director of Rebirth, and then also with Tetsuya Nomura, and with the director of Remake and the original Final Fantasy VII. And so that was pretty cool, just to hear their perspectives on things. Kind of how Advent Children played a role in them making Remake eventually, right? And so they had some really nice insights. Probably the biggest thing that came out of that kind of interview thing before the film was some specific things that were said about Remake Trilogy. Probably the most interesting thing was that they specifically said that one of their major assignments for the trilogy was to work in at least one thing, one topic or one character, just things from every single spin-off of Final Fantasy VII. And so we've kind of already seen that a little bit, right? So we have in Remake, in Intergrade, they had Weiss from Dirge of Cerberus. They worked him in. He hadn't been in anything else besides Dirge of Cerberus. He was in there. We of course have Zack in the form kind of that we see him in Crisis Core come back. Of course, Zack's in the original game as well. In the Rebirth, most recent Rebirth footage, we actually see one of the Turks that only appeared in Crisis Core. So it looks like she's going to be in Rebirth as well. How big her role is, I don't know. But we have her. And so I'm trying to think the other spin-off stuff. I mean, there's First Soldier, but I feel like I don't know if there's anything directly relating to that in any of the trilogy stuff that we've seen so far. And then another thing that they made a direct reference to before the beginning of the film is kind of a theory that had been thrown out there, was that the Whisper trio that you fight at the end of Remake were supposed to be basically Kadaj, was it Maze and Lotz from Advent Children. They have like similar weaponry, and so they specifically said, like, yeah, these guys are from that, right? So they called it out and they said, yeah, those guys that you fight in Remake, that's we used these guys from Advent Children as a basis for them, right? So potentially in Remake you have most of the spin-off stuff already intact, and then there's also, like I said, the addition of, it looks like a Turk from Crisis Core in Rebirth. My question is, I never played before Crisis on mobile. I've never even really seen a video of it, so I don't really know what all characters could be in that, but I'm sure there's potential for other characters to kind of cross over from that. And so what other things could we see, right? What are some theories that we could throw out, right? So like, I think the most interesting thing was that watching Advent Children again, especially in the complete version, which I don't know that I've ever actually watched all the way through. You know, I watched the original, and then I think I saw clips online of the rest of Advent Children, like the extra stuff that they'd added, but I don't know that I'd ever actually watched it from beginning to end. So there's a few things in there that strangely feel like they set up for Rebirth, right? There's like there's a scene with Denzel and Cloud on the hill, and it's like, you know, did somebody die here? And Cloud said, no, this is where a hero's journey began, right? And to me, it's like, whoa. I mean, Cloud could be talking about himself, right? But what else could he be talking about? Could he be talking about Zack again? Because obviously there's something going on in Rebirth where Zack's alive. And there's a lot of fan theories out there. There's a lot of really popular theories about time travel and timelines and things like that, which is I feel like it's very possible. What was really interesting to me is how Sephiroth leaves at the end of Advent Children. And it's not like a goodbye, right? Like, he is not expecting to be gone. So where does he go? You know? So he kind of evaporates, and Kadaj comes back and then, you know, dies or gets reabsorbed into the life stream. But what happens to those Shinnov cells that created that image of Sephiroth, that fight with Sephiroth, you know? And so could at the end of Advent Children Sephiroth decide, well, I'm gonna change things and kind of use some kind of crazy magic, Genova magic, to actually create alternate timelines, go back in time? Like, what could really be the cause of what's going on in the Remake Trilogy? If it is like a timeline jump, you know, what does that mean for our characters? In what timelines do they exist? Are they parallel timelines? Is there going to be some kind of crossover? You know, what does that mean? And also, you know, what's important to the story? Are we going to see two completely separate stories play out that are just branches and they never cross paths? Like I said, parallel timelines. Or is there going to be some kind of crossover between, you know, Cloud and party that are in seemingly the original timeline of the game, or not original, but they're following the events of the original game, and this other stuff with Zack. The other possibilities that I've heard thrown out there is that Zack is still dead, and that all of this stuff is happening, you know, in the afterlife or in somebody's mind. Like, it could be in Aerith's mind or somebody else's mind. I might buy that, except for the fact that there's events that Zack wasn't there for, you know, and there's a time skip, right? Because the time that Zack gets back to Midgar and then the events of Final Fantasy VII Remake take place, there's a gap, right? A gap of at least, we don't know exactly how long Cloud was in Midgar before he joined Tifa and their group, but it, you know, it was more than a day, right? There's at least 2 or 3 days that are spanned in Remake. So you have to think that this is something that doesn't quite fit up timeline wise. Because if Zack's dragging Cloud in this other version across to Midgar, it would take him seemingly less time than it took Cloud to get into Midgar by himself, yet get to find Tifa randomly in Sector 7 and then join her group. So if there's a timeline gap there, you have to wonder what the trigger point is. Is it the whispers? Is it Sephiroth going back in time? What's the trigger for these events to happen where Zack is actually alive? But Advent Children did some weird things that I feel like almost set up what could possibly happen, maybe without even meaning to at the time. And so another thing that was very evident from rewatching Advent Children is just how much of the character models that are used in the Remake Trilogy were, the tone for those and the animation style for those were set by Advent Children. You know, they had to take these characters that were in a PlayStation 1 game that were essentially polygons with a few FMV sequences, and had to create CGI, a CGI film with designs for these characters. And the amount of work that went into that was obviously pretty heavy, right? And so they were able to design these characters, and then along with that, later they did Dirge of Cerberus and things like that allowed them to use the characters more, which I think kind of really set the tone for what Remake would look like, what the characters would look like. And some of the designs changed a little bit. Barrett's design, there's a quick shot of him in the final battle with Sephiroth. I think his design probably changed to me the most, just in like clothing, body shape, size, things like that. But everybody else seems pretty similar to what was established for them in Advent Children. So going back and kind of rewatching that and seeing that again kind of just affirmed to me, like, there was a reason that we liked Advent Children when it came out, right? Because it brought these, they were three-dimensional characters, right? But it brought these polygons and short FMV sequence characters into a more realistic tone. And they talk about that too, their struggle with creating the characters and making them look realistic enough without looking creepy. And so that was something they had to work pretty hard on. Probably the most glaring thing with Advent Children, with the complete version anyway, is that they created a bunch of new scenes that kind of flesh out the story a little bit more, especially with Denzel's background. But because they created them so long after the original scenes were made, it's like it looks, the CGI looks not great, and then it looks really sharp and good for like a scene, and then it goes back to not looking great, and then it goes back to looking really good. So it was like hard to tell. It was hard to tell what part of the film we were in, based on these scenes that were kind of interwoven into the mix. I think all of the scenes that were added for the complete version were cool, but it was, like I said, a little jarring. You didn't know what to expect if you'd never seen it that way, which I hadn't. So, but all in all, I'm glad that they re-released Advent Children, especially for just, honestly, I would have gone to see it just for the interviews with the directors and the creators of the Remake Trilogy, and the questions that they answered about Advent Children, about the Remake Trilogy, and kind of where they're headed. There was some really good moments that I'm like, man, if I hadn't come to see this, I don't know. I mean, I probably could have caught it online somewhere, these interviews, but like, I'm getting some information that like I didn't expect to get out of just going to see a movie. So it was pretty cool. It was enjoyable, and I'm glad that I went. I was on the fence about going because I didn't have anybody to go with me, but I was like, you know what, I don't care, I'll just go see it, and it was a great time. I'm glad I did it. So yeah, Advent Children, it's worth a rewatch before Rebirth comes out, even if you don't have the ability to go see it in the movie theater. It's on Vudu and other things like that, and you can find the complete version pretty easily online, I think. So yeah, go check it out if you've never watched Advent Children at all, or if you've just never seen the complete version. I'd recommend just getting a refresher on like kind of where some of the designs for the current iteration of the character started, because it's really fun to watch. Story is good. It's not fantastic. I think really what this movie did for its time was like it brought CGI action into the forefront of like what could be done, and it also gave us like a realistic look for the first time at some of these characters and like their abilities. So you see Cloud use Braver, essentially. You see him use Blade Beam. He has a new version of Omni Slash, which you can use in Super Smash Brothers, I think. But yeah, he has a new version of Omni Slash. You get to see Tifa do some moves. She does a beat rush. She does a somersault. She does basically a meteor strike where she jumps up in the air and then throws the person back down to the ground. So there's some really cool moments in the film that that kind of like affirm like, wow, this was a really cool moment in time when they made this. You know, there weren't a lot of video game films that weren't like really bad live action films or animated films before there weren't full CGI films like this for video games titles, right? You could tell it was made with a lot of love and care by the creators that worked on Final Fantasy VII, the original. So